Welcome back to 3LBCA. This is Micah, your host, and today we're going to be looking at this article from Global News saying half of those arrested in tense Halifax housing protest no longer facing charges. This was a really big movement against police brutality, against basically homeless violence that the police were doing in Halifax. And luckily, the courts are starting to rule in favor of the protesters and against the police. And this has become a really big issue, and this is going to continue to become an issue in cities around Canada as housing continues to become less and less affordable. And so we need to all join together as tenants, as residents of our cities, and stand up against just unfair practices by landlords and by housing property management companies. So we're going to go ahead and watch the video here from Global News at 6 Halifax, and then we're going to read through the article, and I'm going to give you my opinion towards the end.
Process of refining a list of designated tent sites for people experiencing homelessness and sleeping rough, after hearing an onslaught of suggestions from counselors about where they feel they should go.
I think we need to look at a spot across from the Dartmouth Sportsplex in the Dartmouth Common area, away from the playground, away from the ball field, but adjacent to the transit terminal.
But counselors and housing advocates pointed out that the people who may be in need of these sites haven't been consulted in the initial process.
That's why this lived experience committee is so critical. We need to remember, as we ask those folks to come and participate, there is a lack of trust that will take time for us to build.
The interim report states the lack of trust stems from HRM's decision to have Halifax Regional Police lead encampment evictions last August.
So when police evict homeless people from parks because they can't find anywhere else to live because they don't have any money to buy a spot to rent or to actually buy a house, obviously, because housing is so freaking expensive in this country. We just decided to send police in to deal with the problem. This happened in Toronto earlier this year. I think it was in January. They beat some poor person's face in because they were standing in their way. This is just unbelievable. And this is up to our cities to get this right. We can't rely on the federal government because the federal government won't do anything about this. Because it's not their problem. It's not jurisdictional for them to actually deal with homelessness. At least that's the interpretation that the federal Liberals and the previous Harper government took. So, that side of this is disturbing. But the fact that instead of helping these people that need help, we just send police in to kick them out of the one spot that they were able to find that was safe. It sucks because, you don't want a homeless encampment across from your house. But at the same time, if your city is so poorly managed that you have homeless people living outside your house or outside your parks, that's a problem with the city leadership. That's a problem with what they've allowed to happen with housing. That's a problem with almost everything related to housing. And really just letting city governments abuse and violate people's human rights by beating them and arresting them for literally just being in a location is absolutely unacceptable.
A loss of faith, the city has asked the United Way Halifax to help rebuild.
Our role will...
This is the same police department as well that has been, they had an officer arrested a year ago for beating the shit out of a homeless guy at a shelter. So even when they're at shelters, Halifax police just wants you dead. That's fucking insane.
Will be to independently reach out to individuals with lived experience and ensure that their voice informs HRM.
United Way is a nonprofit organization that works to address a wide range of social...
Look at this. Look at this image right here on the screen. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think there's an 8th cop there in one tent. It doesn't take 8 cops to move one person out of a tent. It doesn't take 8 cops to move a whole city of people out of tents. It takes houses, you motherfuckers.
issues from poverty to housing and homelessness. The city has asked them to seek out people with current lived experience to include in future recommendations.
People who are living in encampments, it may be reaching people who are roughing it but not in the encampments. It may be people who are in the modular units or in hotels.
The city says the plan is to have input from the Lived Experience Advisory Committee on Homelessness lead the recommendations expected in an update report this summer.
We're going to be working over the next weeks and months to engage with service providers to find the right person or people to do this engagement. And
So I want to commend the United Way for stepping up here and trying to actually make a difference. But the fact that they're the ones having to do this and it's not Halifax City Council and it's not Halifax City actually doing this themselves tells you a lot about what's going on there. I don't want to be too harsh on the city councilors or the people of Halifax, except for the police, because the police are fucking animals. ACAB, always. But the fact that they're relying on a charity to deal with the housing crisis in their community rather than just, using eminent domain, expropriating houses that aren't being used or being abused or are being overpriced by rental agencies or landlord owners. Like, this is the kind of stuff that city governments really need to just put their foot down and say, no, we're not accepting this anymore. Set a flat rent rate for sizes of rooms, and if you can't live with that, then sell the house to the city. That would be one of the rules that I would be highly in favor of. And if that's a situation in which the city, I think in a situation where you have like a quote unquote mom and pop landlord who maybe have one house that they own and one house that they rent out, I think in that situation, you give the family fair value market on that home so they're not out whatever they put out. You buy the house at fair market value, and then you make it available to people to live in. It's really that simple. But the cities in this country don't want to spend money on their actual fucking people. They just want to put more money into their pockets and promote their own personal political agendas and their own careers. It's absolutely disgusting.
And to find the people who want to have their voice heard and make sure that it's represented for HRM Council.
Alexa McLean, Global News, Halifax.
So that was a relatively good piece from Global. I do feel like they're leaving out how shitty Halifax City Council has actually being in this. But let's go ahead and read through the article and see if they make any direct references to actions that City Council has made or any of these kinds of things that are directly related to the abuse of the homeless and the protesters by the police. So let's see if they say anything. Okay, I'm going to be really... It's Carmel Farabaksha. Farabaksh. So Carmel Farabaksh says that when she headed to the Halifax demonstration last August to protest the city's decision to tear down temporary housing for the homeless, she was expecting to peacefully make her point. Instead, the 29-year-old said she was shoved into a police vehicle, suffered a concussion, and was charged with resisting arrest and obstruction, sending her into a 4-month legal ordeal before the Crown dropped the case on January 26th. Farabaksh is one of 12 people out of 26 who have had their charges from the protest withdrawn or dismissed. Another 3 people's cases have been sent to restorative justice. 10 months after the protest, Farabaksh says she is still angry for going through what many protesters in Canada experience, being charged by police and thrust into legal cases that don't meet the Crown standards for prosecution. It was one of the scariest experiences of my adult life, she said in a recent interview about her hours in custody. There was no communication to me about what my charges were. I wasn't told why I was being held. I was suffering from an injury, a concussion, and that there was no care or attention to the injury. Sorry you had an injury and you weren't taken care of, but that's not our problem because you were in custody. Like, no, that is your problem. You are in custody and you have a duty of care over these people if you're putting them under arrest. And any sort of actions that cause bodily harm to a subject in custody that is later found to have not broken the law should be prosecuted against that police officer or that police department. And I hope that this lady, is allowed to sue the Halifax Police Service. They should. The charges against her and others who attended the protest resulted from a demonstration that began on the morning of August 18th. After police were told by the city to clear public grounds of tents and temporary wooden shelters built by advocacy groups for the homeless. The grounds in front of the former Halifax Public Library is the city's downtown filled with demonstrators. Clashes broke out between police and demonstrators on streets lined with shops and cafes. The protesters were sprayed in the face with chemical irritants. Yeah, okay, this is good. This is good reporting here. Call it like it is. Call it like it is. These police officers abuse the shit out of these protesters because they don't want homeless people in their town. This is just fascist police state shit all over. We see it in the States all the goddamn time. Now we see this shit here, Toronto, Halifax. It's going to start happening here too. We have a shared culture. Police issued a release later that day announcing the arrest, with the chief stating officers were, quote, in a very complex and difficult situation and responded to the best of their abilities with what they had under the circumstances. You sure about that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 officers, one dude. Maybe two. Maybe this person right here is also a protester, and this one might be two. So you've got, in this image, you've got 10 or 11 cops and 1 to 3 protesters. They did the best they could. They had to use chemical weapons against their citizens of their town. However, defense lawyer Asaf Rashid, who has represented most of these charged in the Halifax demonstration, based Asaf, 11 of his clients have had their charges withdrawn or dismissed. He says he'll fight 6 upcoming cases with constitutional arguments. Good. His clients' charges include obstruction of justice, restricting arrest, and assault of a police officer. Honestly, more people should. What's the point of all these arrests and all that money and time going into that, Rashid said in a recent interview. That raised questions to me about why that happened. Rashid, we all know why that happened. We all know why that happened. They don't want homeless people in their parks. And if that means using violence to make that happen, they're going to 100% do that. Rashid points to Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees the security of a person on grounds to invalidate the city order to destroy temporary wooden structures erected on municipal land. Exactly. This is a constitutional issue. But the federal government seems to just ignore any jurisdiction that they have over this because they decided at some point that they don't give a fuck about people. People who were staying here had nowhere else to go, so it raises the issue of whether their fundamental rights to security of the person were violated, therefore making the police actions that day unlawful. That's the argument I'd be making too. This is, at the very least, it's a violation of Section 7. It might also be a violation of Section 2. But I think Section 7 is definitely the way to go. But yeah, no, I think if you have housing that's being built, even if it's temporary housing, being built on public city land, and then you have cops come out and kick people out of their housing that they'd have nowhere else to go to, that is a violation of Section 7 of the Charter. It's 100% a violation. Fairbanks says she didn't expect to be involved in clashes when she attended the rally, adding that she wanted to support LGBTQ youth she counseled, who said they were struggling to find housing. Fairbanks said she was detained from about noon to about 9 p.m. that night before that police lockup. So she was detained for 9 hours for attending a protest. For kids, youth, young people who couldn't afford housing because of whatever situations that they've been put through, whether they were disowned by their family and kicked out onto the streets, whether they were involved in, other situations that basically put them into that situation, or if they were just trying their absolute hardest and couldn't make it. This happens all the time. And the fact that you can just send police in to kick them out is unbelievable. After learning her charges would be dropped in January, Fairbox said she felt a sense of relief, but it was accompanied by a sense of anger for those times stolen from me. Yeah, you should sue them. Excessive resources and force. Canadian defense lawyers say the events in Halifax reflect a trend across the country. Municipalities and police forces are resorting to heavy-handed tactics rather than assisting the homeless in finding shelter other than on public land. What's the point of a government if you have public land if people cannot be on that public land? That's the point of public land. You can't just kick people off of it. Seema Atri, co-director of the Community Justice Collective in Toronto, said in an email that last July, large numbers of people were detained during a protest. Hey, I talked about this one. Against the clearing of a homeless encampment in the city's Allen A. Lamport Stadium. Few charges proceeded to court. Yeah, they arrested like 60 people, and only 3 people ended up getting charged. I think one of them was actually a police officer. Another one was one of the organizers, and another one was just some random homeless person. Like, the way the police in the city responded to Lamport Stadium is just another example of excessive resources and force being used against people standing up and protesting, especially around the issues of housing and police. Halifax police spokesperson, this guy's a gem, Constable John McLeod said in an email, as with any case we lay, we believe that to be the appropriate charges based on the investigation evidence and then bring the matter before the courts. Ryan Nearing, a spokesperson for the city of Halifax, said that while the province is the lead agency charged with addressing housing, there you go. There you go. You're just doing the thing that all these cities are doing. We're just we're just following jurisdictional boundaries here, guys. We can't be involved in housing, so we have to send the police out to brutalize homeless people. That's literally their argument, is that we can't do anything about the homeless issue because it's a provincial issue, and because it's a provincial issue, the province has to be the ones that tell us not to do what we're doing to get rid of people off the property. Fucking nuts, dude. City has provided support that has included purchasing and installing modular units to accommodate 64 people. Ryan, 64 people. How many people live in Halifax? I actually don't know this. Let's find out. What is the population of Halifax? I'm going to guess it's just under a million? 439,000. Okay. Homeless population of Halifax. Also from the CBC. 586 people have no permanent home according to count. This was in May. Oh, this was just a few weeks ago. So 586 people have no permanent home according to count, according to the CBC. And if anybody's going to undercount, it's going to be the CBC. So we're going to say 586 people. That's the number they gave us. He's bragging about installing housing units for 64 people. So let's just do some math real quick. Hold on. 64 divided by 586 is 10.9%. Congratulations, Halifax. Congratulations. You've effectively solved 11% of the problem. Good job, guys. Good job. Nearing said the city is also letting provincially funded agencies use city facilities as temporary shelters, adding that Halifax has approved $70,000 to a coalition of 11 community service providers to fund hotel stays to support homeless people. Wow. Wow. You really care. $70,000. Wow. You really, really care. Oh, that's so kind of you at the city of Halifax. Fairbox said that she remains distrustful of the intentions of police, no shit, as well as provincial and municipal governments in the wake of her rough arrest and her first encounter with the criminal justice system. Quote, it shows me they're not invested in process of community repair or reparation. It shows me a lack of commitment to these promises. Here's a little bit of a news flash. The cops in the cities don't give a shit. They're like, here's $70,000 in accommodation for 11% of our population that needs it. The rest of you guys, we're just gonna fucking brutalize you. You'll figure it out. You'll pull yourself up. You'll find housing. This $70,000 we're gonna give to these community service providers is definitely gonna solve the issue. We're gonna just fund money into hotels. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end. If you really enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe. And if you kind of liked it, give it that like. And make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. Until tomorrow, everybody, have yourselves a fantastic, fantastic day. Peace.